Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we step into one of the darkest, most chilling, and emotionally devastating crime scenes in American history, a story that unfolded in silence, under the cover of night, in a quiet Midwestern town that believed such horror could never reach its doorstep. This is inside the Villisca axe murders, the night an entire family was slaughtered, a mystery so brutal and so unresolved that more than a century later it still whispers through history. Our story begins in Villisca, Iowa, a small, close-knit farming town in 1912, where doors were rarely locked, neighbors trusted one another, and the Moore family was well known and respected. Josiah Moore, a successful businessman, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Mary Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, a family seen as hardworking, religious, and deeply rooted in the community, living a life that appeared safe, ordinary, and untouched by danger. On the evening of June 9, 1912, the Moores attended a local church program along with 2 young sisters, Lena and Ina Stillinger, who were invited to stay the night, and after the service ended, the group returned home, unaware that by morning, none of them would be alive. Sometime after midnight, an unknown intruder entered the Moore house, likely through an unlocked door, carrying an axe believed to belong to the family itself, and what followed was an act of violence so methodical and savage that it stunned even hardened investigators. One by one, every member of the household was bludgeoned to death in their sleep, including the 2 visiting children, with such force that skulls were crushed and blood soaked the beds. Yet remarkably, no one was heard screaming, suggesting the killer moved with terrifying control and intent. Investigators later discovered that the blunt end of the axe had been used, a detail that added another layer of brutality, and that after each killing, the murderer covered the victims' faces with sheets or clothing, a strange and intimate act that hinted at either guilt, ritual, or a deeply disturbed psychological state. Mirrors in the house were covered, lamps were turned down, and food was left uneaten, suggesting the killer spent time inside the home after the murders, moving calmly through the rooms as if unafraid of discovery, transforming the crime scene into something far more unsettling than a moment of rage. This was a calculated massacre. When the bodies were discovered the next morning, Villisca was thrown into shock and terror, as the sheer scale of the violence shattered the town's sense of safety, and crowds flooded the house before it could be properly secured, contaminating evidence and complicating the investigation from the very beginning. Law enforcement struggled to make sense of what they were seeing, as there were no clear signs of forced entry, no obvious robbery, and no single motive that explained why an entire family, and 2 innocent guests, had been annihilated. Suspicion fell on several individuals over the years, including a traveling minister with a history of mental illness, a disgruntled former employee of Josiah Moore, and even a local man rumored to have had violent tendencies. Yet despite interrogations, accusations, and even a grand jury, no one was ever convicted, and each theory collapsed under a lack of definitive evidence. What made the Villisca axe murders even more horrifying was the realization that this crime was not entirely unique, as similar axe murders had occurred across the United States in the years surrounding 1912, often involving families killed in their sleep, raising fears that a serial killer may have been roaming the country, leaving behind scenes of quiet devastation before disappearing without a trace. As time passed, the Moore house became less a home and more a symbol of unanswered questions, investigative failure, and the fragile illusion of safety. And even decades later, people reported strange occurrences inside the building, from unexplained footsteps and voices to feelings of dread, blurring the line between true crime and the paranormal, and further embedding the case into American folklore. Historians and psychologists have continued to analyze the crime, suggesting the killer may have been driven by deep-seated rage, compulsion, or a desire for domination, someone capable of blending into society by day and committing unimaginable violence by night, a reminder that the most terrifying threats are often the ones that go unnoticed. Despite advances in forensic science, modern investigations have been unable to definitively identify the murderer, leaving the case officially unsolved, a permanent wound in the history of American crime. The Villisca axe murders endure not simply because of their brutality, but because of their silence. No confession, no closure, no justice, only a house, a town, and a nation left to wonder how such evil could arrive unannounced and vanish just as completely. And now, as we step away from the shadows of that blood-stained house and return to the present, we are left with a chilling truth that still resonates today, that even in the quietest places, beneath the most ordinary lives, darkness can wait patiently, and when it strikes, it may leave behind nothing but questions. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of America's most haunting unsolved crimes, and as we close this story, remember this: some mysteries are not meant to comfort us with answers, but to remind us how fragile safety truly is, and how easily it can be taken away in a single night of unimaginable horror.